Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, today's video is a bit of an odd one. You imagine going back 300-400 years to when they used to cut the heads off traitors. What happened to the heads when they rolled away? Now, I do know for some of the nobility, like Anne Boleyn, for instance, they were buried with their head. But for the rest of them, hundreds, if not thousands of heads throughout history, what happened to them? So we're going to delve into that gruesome subject of what happened to the heads once they were cut off. And it just so happens I've got one here that I prepared earlier. It's interesting, isn't it? Since man was able to walk the earth and fight each other, it would appear that they've been cutting off each other's heads. Did they display them as a warning, or were they just a trophy? If you go to central Sweden, Canal Jordan there, they found 10 skulls, 9 adults and 1 infant. 8,000 years old, these skulls. Lower jaws have been removed. Apparently they've been placed particularly within a stone pile. And 2 of the skulls had the remains of wooden stakes in them, so it would appear they have been displayed. Now, this must be a custom. We know the Gauls did it, we know the Celts did it. Everybody was cutting off their heads as this deterrent or as a warning. But if you look into English history particularly, the medieval times going right the way through to the late 1600s, the cutting off the heads of traitors and displaying them, well, they got it down to a fine art. Back in the medieval times, there were lots of execution sites within the city of London. You've got Smithfield, you've got Westminster, and then later you've got the Tyburn. But the most famous, of course, is Tower Hill, just to the north side of the Tower of London. And that site is drenched in the blood, the agony of those hundreds of people who were executed as traitors. Now, there were beheadings, these executions conducted in private. If it was somebody important like Anne Boleyn or Catherine Howard, the wives of Henry VIII, they were executed inside the Tower of London. And you can go and pay homage at the glass cushion there, which symbolises how they caught the heads of Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard and others who were executed within the confines of the tower. But the public spectacle of seeing one of the most famous people being executed was quite something. Now, if you imagine somebody as important as Thomas More, the Catholic martyr, people would have flocked in from all around to see him being executed. Many would have been reverent and silent. Others may have called out abuse. Now, Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's chancellor there, he was hated at the end, and they would have jeered and shouted for sure. It was a spectacle. But as that axe came down, thump, the head wasn't allowed to roll off. It was caught, either in a bag or in a cloth, because the head was destined to go somewhere else. So, the axe comes down, the head is severed, the body will be released for burial, or if it's to be quartered, it'll be cut into 4, and the different parts sent off to the 4 corners of the realm, so to speak. But the head, which has been gathered up, will now be removed from the site of execution, and it will be prepared to be mounted for public display on Old London Bridge. You see, there was a semi-official position called Keeper of the Heads, and on the south gate of Old London Bridge, they used to mount the heads. And as you can see, I haven't quite made a model. I've borrowed my grandson's castle that I made many years ago, and as you can see, there are many uses for Lego heads. But how did they preserve those heads? So the Keeper of the Heads, he shoves them onto a pike, puts them onto the top of the south gate. How did they prevent the birds and the beasts from actually devouring the heads? Well, it just so happens we have an eyewitness account of how they preserved the severed heads. Our eyewitness to the preserving of the heads was Thomas Elwood, a religious dissenter. He was actually the friend of John Milton, the famous poet of Paradise Lost fame. So we're talking 17th century here. He was in Newgate prison when he witnessed near to his cell the preserving of the heads. Now, first of all, he'd seen several freshly quartered bodies, so he was quite reviled by this. Now, I'm going to translate this from the Old English into a little bit of a modern speech. The hangman came in with the heads in a dirty old basket. He then pulled them out and made fun of them, held them by the hair, these heads. So this executioner there, he didn't care. He then slapped them around the face, boxed their ears, he said, and made fun of them. He then placed them into a boiling kettle. So this is an iron cauldron filled with bay salt and cumin seeds, that to keep from putrefaction, and this to keep off the fowl from seizing them. So the heads were parboiled in this salt and these cumin seeds so that the beasts will not touch them. And I do know that on top of that, once the heads were preserved, they'll be put aside to dry. Once dried, they will be dipped into tar and then handed over to the keeper of the heads at the south gate to Old London Bridge. There they will have a pike spiked into them, and they will be mounted on the battlements overlooking the south gate. Now, if any of you are walking in to the Old London Bridge at Southgate and you looked up trying to identify any of the heads, I will imagine it'd be quite difficult. By the time they'd been parboiled and covered in tar, they'd be pretty much unrecognisable. So it's incredible, isn't it, that we have an eyewitness account of the executioner actually boiling the heads to preserve them. And then they were mounted. The purpose to mount them, of course, was as a warning to others. If you are a traitor to the king, then you're in trouble. We're going to cut your head off. And the public's reaction to it, some were horrified by it. Others thought it was hilarious. But then you had this twist. The enemies of those heads, of the people whose heads is now on the south gate there, they were often quite smug, and they would bring friends around and they would go, there he is, it's that one over there. And it really is quite something. Now that the keeper of the heads, he was master of the South Tower or the South Gate on London Bridge. And he would rotate the heads. Get your head around this. I love that. He would see how badly decomposed the heads were. Apparently it's a month that they would stay up there. And if there were any that were really rotting away, no good, he'd simply throw them over the side into the River Thames. Now, legend has it, I don't know if this is true or not, that when the old bridge was demolished, they did find skulls in the mud. I wouldn't be surprised. But not every head was destined to be tossed into the River Thames. You take the severed head of Thomas More, that was quite quickly apparently returned to his daughter, Margaret Roper, for burial. So not every head was destined to be tossed into the River Thames. If there was compassion, maybe they would look after the head and return it as soon as they could to the family. Or was it a case, if you had a corrupt keeper of the heads, you could bribe him. You could actually pay to get your old man's head back. Nice. Some of the most famous heads that were placed onto the South Gate, the South Tower of London Bridge, is quite amazing. The first, 1305, was none other than William Wallace, the great Scotsman fighting for his freedom there. Then you have Wat Tyler is another one from the Peasants' Revolt. Anybody who goes against the king seems to end up there. You got Thomas Percy, the first Earl of Worcester. His head was on there. Jack Cade from the Cade's Rebellion. And then you have Guy Fawkes, Guido Fawkes from the Gunpowder Plot, he who wanted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. But interestingly, you have the only woman whose head was placed on a pike on London Bridge. That's Elizabeth Barton. She was a nun, but she prophesied against Henry VIII's marriage to Anne Boleyn. Don't upset the king. Your head will end up on a pike. In fact, the last head was 1678, and that was William Staley. You see, the practice was in decline. People found it distasteful, and also it wasn't working because these heads on the pikes were becoming a tourist attraction. People would come to the City of London and make sure they took in the sights, particularly the South Gate, with all of the heads on the pikes. You know, it's amazing what we human beings can get used to. You know, it's easy to forget when we look at these subjects of history that these people were real and the effects of their death upon their families was catastrophic. But still to this day, heads are severed and put on display, either for a deterrent or as a trophy. I sometimes wonder, you know, in the human race, how much have we advanced, really? But anyhow, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at our Patreon community? The link is in the description. Now, before I go any further, just a quick shout out to some of our Patreon members. We have Shane Hunter, Richard Langalotti and Adam Deal. Now, thanks a million, guys. Without you, I wouldn't be able to do these films. So from me and Julie, thanks and bye for now.